Jai Hind, dear students. I am Dr. Preeti, and today we are going to revise respiration. This seems to be a very important topic for your final exams. I have a feeling that this year you can probably have respiration and excretory system in your final exams. So just see to it very nicely. Okay, so let's start with that. What's respiration and how it's different from breathing? When we perform breathing, we take in oxygen air that is containing oxygen and we breathe out air that is rich in carbon dioxide. This process of inhalation and exhalation is known as breathing. But when this oxygen goes to each and every cell of our body, then our body utilizes this oxygen to release the carbon dioxide. That process of breakdown of glucose to release the energy and utilize the oxygen in that process, that is known as respiration. Okay, so in detail we'll see about respiration. But what I said, we are breathing out carbon dioxide. How we can test that? If we blow out air from our mouth into water containing like that is lime water that is containing calcium hydroxide, you know that calcium hydroxide, when combines with carbon dioxide, turns the lime water milky. So, if you blow out air from your mouth into a pot containing lime water, then that lime water is going to turn milky, which shows yes, we are breathing out carbon dioxide. Okay, so now let's start with respiration. Respiration means the breakdown of glucose to release the energy. This breakdown of glucose can occur by various ways depending on the type of organism and the requirement. Okay, so we'll talk about that in detail now. Glucose, is a 6 carbon compound. Why I'm calling that glucose a 6 carbon compound? Because the formula of glucose is C6H12O6. So you can see that it's C6H12O6 means 6 atoms of carbon are there in one molecule of glucose. So that's why we call it as a 6 carbon compound. Now, this glucose will be broken down to form pyruvate, which is a 3 carbon compound. Every molecule of pyruvate contains 3 atoms of carbon. So it's called a 3 carbon compound. This conversion of glucose to pyruvate takes place in the cell cytoplasm, irrespective of the organism, whether it's an anaerobic organism or human being or any of the organism. Whenever respiration is performed, then this glucose will be converted into pyruvate in the cytoplasm only. That can come as a 1 marks question, so remember that very well. Now, this pyruvate could be further broken down into compounds depending on the type of organism. If that organism is an anaerobic organism, means that organism performs anaerobic respiration, means respiration without using oxygen. Then that pyruvate, in absence of oxygen, like in organisms like yeast, it will be converted to ethanol and carbon dioxide. Ethanol just has 2 carbon atoms. I hope you remember the formula of ethanol, C2H5OH. So ethanol will be formed, carbon dioxide will be formed, and energy will be released. Fine. This type of respiration is known as anaerobic respiration. Now, if this pyruvate is broken down in presence of oxygen, what's going to take place? I'm talking about the third situation first, then we'll talk about the second one. So, if this pyruvate is broken down in presence of oxygen, that usually happens in all aerobic organisms like plants, like human beings, all other animals that we see around us, dog, cat, all, they are performing aerobic respiration. That is respiration in presence of oxygen. Now, if it is in presence of oxygen, the next step is going to take place in mitochondria. If it was in the absence of oxygen, that step also takes place in the cell cytoplasm only. But if it's in presence of oxygen, the second step of breaking down of pyruvate further, that will be taking place in mitochondria of the cells. So, in mitochondria, what will be formed? Carbon dioxide water, and a lot of energy will be released. This process of respiration is known as aerobic respiration because it's taking place in presence of oxygen. A third situation could be there. Suppose you are doing very vigorous exercise. If you are running very fast, at that time your muscles need a lot of oxygen. But that much of oxygen, if it's not supplied to the muscles, then your muscles start performing the respiration and releasing the energy in absence of oxygen only. And in that case, in the muscle cells, lactic acid is produced from pyruvate. So this pyruvate results in the formation of lactic acid in the muscles only when there is a lack of oxygen, when you, especially when you are doing vigorous exercise. At that time, lactic acid will be formed. Lactic acid is a 3-carbon compound, a compound containing 3 atoms of carbon. Pyruvate was also 3-carbon compound. Lactic acid also is a 3-carbon compound only. Okay. So 3 carbon से 3 carbon form हुए हैं, no extra carbon is there, so no carbon dioxide will be formed in this case. Okay. Now, what will be released? Energy will be released. But whenever this lactic acid gets deposited in the muscles, that causes the cramps. So you could be asked in your exams, what is the cause of cramps in the muscles? Cramps, what are cramps? Pain. Whenever you exercise a lot, you must have felt some pain in the muscles, and that is known as cramps. So that could lead to this deposition of lactic acid can lead to cramps in your muscles. So that is how breakdown of glucose occurs by different ways depending on the type of organism and the supply of oxygen. Okay, based on this flow chart, you could be asked directly to draw the flow chart for a 3 marks question, or you could be asked 1 marks questions based on this, or you could be asked to differentiate between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Okay, so all that you could make out from this particular flow chart. Okay, now just let's quickly revise the difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration is a type of respiration that takes place in presence of oxygen, as in human beings, plants, and higher animals like cat, dog, elephant, all. Anaerobic respiration is a type of respiration that takes place in absence of oxygen, as in anaerobic organisms like yeast. Okay. In case of aerobic respiration, the amount of energy produced is large, and in case of anaerobic respiration, the amount of energy that is produced is small. That is, little energy is produced. Okay. Next is, in case of aerobic respiration, there is complete breakdown of glucose to form carbon dioxide and water and release the energy. But in case of anaerobic respiration, there is incomplete breakdown of glucose resulting in formation of ethanol and carbon dioxide with release of energy. Okay. In case of aerobic respiration, the second step of respiration, that is breakdown of pyruvate, takes place in the mitochondria. Whereas in case of anaerobic respiration, the second step as well as the first step both takes place in the cell cytoplasm only. Okay. Next point, if required, you can write the example of organisms performing aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Okay. Do you know this ethanol form is the same alcohol that we have discussed in carbons compound also, and that is used for drinking purpose. So on large scale, whenever there is ethanol production, this ethanol is prepared by fermentation using yeast only. Glucose fermentation is performed. In which form we are taking glucose? We can perform the fermentation of grapes or apple or sugarcane, and we put yeast in that, and then that perform anaerobic respiration, and that way only ethanol is prepared commercially. Okay, that is used for drinking purpose, that is used in antiseptics also. So that is how ethanol is produced. I hope that is clear to you all. It's very important chart, just revise that very nicely. Okay, this is given as a flow chart in your book as well. Now if we discuss about the respiration in different organisms, like in plants, do they perform respiration? Yes. When do they perform respiration? During the daytime or during the night time? 24 hours. So, the plants perform respiration during the day as well as at the night. But during the day, they perform photosynthesis also. So, whatever carbon dioxide is produced during the process of respiration, that carbon dioxide is used as a raw material for the process of photosynthesis by the plants. And in the same way, when they are producing the oxygen, some part of that during the process of photosynthesis, they're producing oxygen. Na? So, that oxygen produced during photosynthesis, a part of that is used for respiration. But respiration in plants is very slow process. They don't require much energy. Na? They are just standing at one place only, not moving here and there. So, their energy requirement is low. So, respiration process is also very slow in plants. Okay. Now, if we talk about respiration and compare it the aquatic organisms with terrestrial organisms, then also we'll find a difference. I hope this I can erase this out. This is there in your book itself. So that was about breakdown of glucose by various pathways, and it's really very important for your exams. Okay. If we compare the respiration aquatic plants and that with the terrestrial organisms, the aquatic organisms breathing rate means the number of times they are inhaling and exhaling out. That breathing rate is more in aquatic organisms as compared to terrestrial organisms. Why they are breathing so fast? Because in one breathing they are getting very little amount of oxygen only, because the amount of oxygen dissolved in water is less as compared to the amount of oxygen in the air. So with one breathing they just can consume only with they just get very small amount of oxygen only. So they need to increase the breathing rate to get that oxygen dissolved in the water. Okay, so breathing rate is aquatic organisms is faster as compared to terrestrial organism. Terrestrial means the organisms living on land. Okay, so because of the reason that the amount of oxygen dissolved in water is less as compared to the amount of oxygen available in the air. Okay, now coming to the human respiratory system, we saw that we produced energy in the process of respiration. This energy is stored in the form of ATP. Our body stores all the energy in the ATP. What is this ATP? ATP means adenosine triphosphate. So all the energy that we produce during the process of respiration, it's stored in the energy rich molecule that is known as ATP. I hope you remember. ATP is the energy currency of the body. How much energy is released by this ATP? When we use the energy from the ATP, we get 30.5 kilojoules of energy per mole. So from 1 mole of ATP, our body will get 30.5 kilojoules of energy. Okay, so remember that it's very important. Now, coming to the structure and the process, how the oxygen is reaching to each and every cell of our body, looking at the structure of the human respiratory system. Now, let's start with that. First of all, when we inhale, when we take in the air, that is going into the nasal passage through the nostrils. What are the nostrils? The opening in the nose are known as nostrils, and through the nostrils the air will be going into the nasal passage. Okay, so first of all the air will be going into the nasal passage. In the nasal passage there are very important things. One is the hairs that you can see inside your nose also. So hair are present inside the nasal passage. Apart from that, mucus is there. What is the importance of these two? Hair and mucus both trap the dust particles, microorganisms that enter along with the air. So they just try to trap that air containing dust particles or microorganisms. So These microorganisms or dust particles will be trapped by the hairs present in the nose as well as the mucus present in the nasal passage. Okay, then the air will be going passing through the nasal passage into the larynx. Okay, this larynx is having a covering because before passing to the larynx, there is a passage that is a common passage for food as well as for the inhaled air. Okay, so before passing to the larynx, before the air enters into the larynx, the pathway is the same for food that we eat as well as for the air that we inhale. But the food shouldn't enter the larynx and it should go into the esophagus only. And only the air should go into the larynx. So this larynx is covered by a flap-like structure. Flap-like structure means a lid-like structure. Okay, so there is a flap-like structure which covers the larynx and prevents the entry of food into the larynx. That flap-like structure is known as epiglottis. Remember, that is called as epiglottis. That prevents the entry of any food particle or water into our larynx. Fine. From the larynx, the air is going to your throat. Which part of throat? That is in the trachea. Okay. So from the larynx, the air will be passing to the trachea. That larynx is also known as a voice box because I'm producing the voice. That is because of the larynx. Larynx has some cartilages and that produces vibration, and so I can speak. So that larynx is also known as voice box. From the larynx, the air goes to the trachea. Now, you can even feel the trachea. Just feel in your neck region. If you just try to feel something, you will feel that something is there here, and that is your trachea. This trachea is having the C-shaped cartilaginous rings. This trachea is having the C-shaped cartilaginous rings. Why I am saying that, sir, they are C-shaped cartilaginous rings and why they are present? Suppose this is the trachea. These cartilaginous rings are present just in front of the trachea. Okay, I'll just shift it this side. So suppose this is the trachea. These C-shaped cartilaginous rings are present just in the front half of the trachea, not behind that, because behind the trachea we have esophagus. Okay, so these C-shaped cartilaginous rings are very important because they prevent the collapse of trachea. Your trachea should never get collapsed. It's really dangerous if it gets collapsed, no? So the trachea should never get collapsed. Even when you are breathing out at that time, the trachea shouldn't get collapsed. Collapse means it shouldn't be like pichak jana. Okay, it shouldn't be like that. So to prevent that, we have C-shaped cartilaginous rings which maintain the shape of trachea. Okay, now from the trachea is going to divide into two bronchus, and each of the bronchus is going to enter into the lungs, one into the right lung and the other one into the left lung. So this each of the bronchus, that plural of bronchus is bronchi. Okay, so there are two bronchus, so we commonly call it as bronchi. Plural is bronchi, singular is bronchus. So the air from the trachea now enters into the bronchus, and that bronchus is going to enter into the lungs. In the lungs, this bronchi, once it enters, it's going to divide many times. It's keep on dividing and dividing. So that forms the bronchioles. After many divisions, some tubes are formed and those tubes are known as bronchioles. These bronchioles further divide more to form alveolar duct, which are ultimately going to enter into the alveoli. What are alveoli? The last part where the bronchioles end into alveolar duct, and these alveolar duct opens into the balloon shaped cells. Balloon shaped cells, which are like balloon shaped cells are there, and those cells are known as alveoli. The alveoli are the structural and functional unit of lungs. These alveoli are richly surrounded by blood capillaries. Why they are surrounded by blood capillaries? It's very important because When we inhale the air, that air is rich in oxygen. And you all know that the body has prepared carbon dioxide during the process of respiration. So, this oxygen from the alveoli goes into the lung, into the blood capillaries, and carbon dioxide from the capillaries comes into the alveoli. This process of exchange of gases across the alveoli and capillaries is known as diffusion. Okay, so there is a process of diffusion, that is exchange of gases at the level of alveoli. The oxygen present in the alveoli goes into the lung capillaries, and the carbon dioxide from the capillaries goes into the lungs alveoli. For this exchange to be occurring, this alveoli are richly surrounded by blood capillaries. There are a large number of blood capillaries around the alveoli which are ready to take up all the oxygen that is present in the inhaled air. Okay, once this exchange occurs, this carbon dioxide comes into the alveoli, then from the alveoli it is going to get back in the reverse direction. Okay, so from the alveoli that will be coming to alveolar duct, from alveolar duct that will be going back into the bronchioles, then bronchi, then trachea, then larynx, and will be moving out through the nasal passage and nostrils once again. Okay, so in the reverse direction it will be going, and at last it will be exhaled out of the nostrils. So this is how this process of exchange of gases it's taking place. Okay, but what is helping us to breathe in and breathe out? Let's see that. So approximately this is the shape of our rib cartilage, ribs. Okay, so a rib cage is there around the lungs, and that acts for the protection of the lungs. One more thing is there, the right lung is bigger as compared to left lung, because the heart is tilted somewhat towards the left side. Heart is present in the midline of the body, but one end of the heart is tilted towards the left lungs. So this left lung is smaller as compared to the right lung. When you are drawing the diagram also, you can show the ribs only on one side of the lungs, and on the other side you can show the division of the bronchus into bronchioles and alveoli. Fine. Now, during the process of respiration, these ribs which protects the lungs, that rib cage also helps in the process of breathing. How they help? In the neutral position, the position of the ribs is somewhat like this, that is tilted downwards. Now, when we inhale, that is when we breathe in the air, this rib cage moves forwards, and the diaphragm, that is a dome shaped muscle that is present just below the lungs. So, this diaphragm moves downwards and it becomes flat. So, if this is your chest cavity, and here you have your lungs, then normally the diaphragm is like this. When you are not inhaling, at that time the diaphragm is in a dome shape. Now, when we inhale, then when we perform inspiration or when we take in air, this diaphragm moves downwards and it becomes approximately flat. When it becomes flat, then the air from the nostrils will be coming, that space inside the chest cavity is increased, and that will pull the air from outside into the chest cavity, because the lungs will now be having more space to get in that air. Okay, so during inspiration the diaphragm moves downwards and it flattens, and the rib cage moves forwards. The rib cage is going to move forward, thus increasing the size of the chest cavity. Fine, that is during the inspiration. During expiration the process will be just opposite of that. So that is all about respiration, that is all about the breathing process also. Okay, now once the oxygen comes into the capillaries, then what is happening with that oxygen? This oxygen reaches to each and every cell of the body through the blood. And who is going to carry this oxygen? That is carried with RBC. RBC have hemoglobin in them. hemoglobin is present inside the red blood cells. So this hemoglobin is going to combine with the oxygen that was taken up from the alveoli and goes into the bloodstream. So this RBC is having hemoglobin, and this hemoglobin is going to combine with this oxygen and take it to each and every cell of the body. But what about carbon dioxide? Was the carbon dioxide also coming up with hemoglobin? No. The carbon dioxide is highly soluble in water. This carbon dioxide being highly soluble in water, and you all know that blood has plasma. The water content of the blood is plasma mainly. So that carbon dioxide being more soluble in water, it's transported along with the plasma only. Okay, वैसे भी कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है ना, ऑक्सीजन इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. सो ऑक्सीजन को ले जाने के लिए तो हम कार भेजने वाले हैं इन द फॉर्म ऑफ आरबीसी दैट इज हैविंग द हीमोग्लोबिन. बट फॉर कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड विच इज नॉट वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर अस, अपने आप ही पैदल चल के जाना होगा इन द प्लाज्मा ऑफ द ब्लड ओनली. ओके, सो रिमेंबर दैट. So that is how the that oxygen will be transported to each and every cell of the body. Each and every cell of the body will take up this oxygen and perform the process of respiration. We have already seen that is breakdown of glucose and release energy, produce carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide will once again come to the alveoli and it will be exchanged. Okay. Now, one of the things that can damage your respiratory system, one of the things that can damage the whole process is smoking. Smoking is really very, very bad for the lungs because our respiratory passage is having cilia. In ninth standard, you must have heard, na? In ninth standard, we have studied that the respiratory passage is having ciliated columnar epithelium. If you don't remember that, just you can let it be. But just remember that respiratory tract is having cilia, and these cilia, like it's like hair like structures are there, microscopic hair like structures are there, which are known as cilia. And these cilia helps to remove the dust particles and the microorganisms that enters into the respiratory tract. But these cilia could be damaged because of the smoke that we inhale because of smoking cigarettes. Apart from that, these this smoke can also damage the lungs alveoli and can lead to lung cancer. It's so dangerous. Apart from that, tobacco chewing is also very dangerous. Some people chew the tobacco, and it's written on every packet of tobacco that it can cause oral cancer. It can cause mouth cancer, but still people purchase that and eat that. So it's really very dangerous because it can damage the mucosa of your mouth, and that tobacco is there that can cause oral cancer or mouth cancer. Okay, so my students are very intelligent. You will always be away from these things. But if you find any person that is indulged in smoking or chewing tobacco, just help that person to come out of that habit. Okay, so that's all about respiration. I hope you must have understood that. That's all for today. Good day, everyone. You can take a screenshot of the diagram if you want, because the diagram that's given in NCRT is a bit more difficult than this one. Okay, so I hope you have taken a screenshot. That's all for today. Good day, everyone.